Hi, this is Cheryl for Bayer's Pampered Stampers. Today I've got another fun product to show you. This is called Paper Glaze. It's made by a company called Picket Fence Studios. Melissa's got about 8 colors of it, I believe. There's this beautiful blue, similarly a darker green, a purple, kind of teal color, and then some lighter colors, which we'll try and show you on the camera. There's a light green and a light pink. Sorry, I was gonna call it red, but that's silly. This is a very light yellow, and there's a white. Now, white is really good for mixing with all the other colors. So if you want to bring down one of these bright colors, you can mix it up. When you work with it, you want to work on one of the silicone or nonstick craft sheets because this stuff does get a little icky sticky and it's hard to get off some surfaces. For the most part, you're going to work with stencils and you're going to push the product through stencils. And I'm going to show you that in just a moment. This card is one where I used I think it was a Gina Marie stencil. And I started out with this color green right here. And then I went through and I added some of this. So I ended up with some areas where I have pure dark green and pure light green, but also some areas around where it's kind of mixed and we're just mixing on the stencil. So it's super, super easy and a lot of fun to do. The consistency of this product is the interesting part. It is actually, and I'm going to open the blue one because that's what we're going to use today, so it's nice and dark for you to see. It's a very smooth textured product, but it's also much thinner than what we're used to dealing with. Things like the Nuvo pots that we had in shop. They were a little bit more whipped texture. This is very, very smooth, very creamy, but also kind of on the thin side. So you have to be a little careful when you're working with it just to make sure that you're not taking too much of the product back off, for example, and that sort of thing. So I'm going to close this up for a minute. The drying time on this product is really pretty quick. It can be about 15 minutes for very light coats of it. So you won't want to leave it sitting around on your stencils very long. You don't want to leave it open very long because it will start to dry the product in the jar. But some of the improvements in this product over some others that are available, and gosh, golly, I have blue all over my fingers, is that it has a much faster drying time. This can dry in as fast as 15 minutes. You can also use a heat tool and speed that drying along. But you want to be a little bit careful with that because sometimes you're working against yourself by using the heat tool. Once dry, it has these fun properties. This is that light yellow that I showed you on white cardstock. I just laid the 2 sheets of white cardstock side by side and kept pushing product through my stencil. So you can see in the gap here where there was no paper, it still went ahead and it holds the stencil form, although it's going to spread a little bit because it's a little bit, again, thin in texture. But it's interesting because it's a product that you could use to hinge things together. It's actually pretty strong depending on how things attach. I have some very thin lines attaching these, and it hasn't been drying all that long. So again, longer drying time is going to strengthen the product up a little bit thicker coat would create a beautiful hinge on this. Another possibility, here's some blue stars that I did. And with these, again, I went ahead and stenciled right on off the edge of the cardstock. And there they are. Actually, let me put this behind. It'll be a little bit easier to see. So there's some really interesting thoughts with using this for cards where you kind of want the design to go off the edge and maybe continue onto a panel behind. Lots of funky ways you can use this stuff. It is just a lot of fun. And also in doing this, because my stars, you can see the stencil pattern is so far apart, I have some stars that are just on their own that I pulled up from my craft mat. And they're just fine. I could actually take that and glue that onto a card if I really wanted to, or add to what's going on here. So there's a lot of fun things you can do with this product. This is one, again, that I did yesterday. You can see a little bit of my scraping lines through and where I kind of pulled the product out here. Again, that's due to its thin consistency. It's not the thick stuff that we're used to. It builds up very nicely and gives very nice texture, but you have to give it a quantity in order to do that. So if you're like me and you scraped everything almost back off, then you're going to end up with light spots in your cardstock, and that's probably not where you want to be. I'm going to set this aside for a moment so I can show you another really fun technique with it. Let me just show you live and in person how this stuff goes on. I've just put a stencil down here on a piece of white cardstock. You can use plain cardstock, you can use watercolor paper, mixed media paper. A little bit heavier might be helpful because this does get a little wet and it would keep from curling so much, but it'll be fine either way. You just have to wait for it to dry and it should come back down. I should add that it's very flexible too. It's not going to crack when you bend it like that. So it's really going to be fine with other techniques that you might use on the paper. And that's also what allows it to be used as kind of a hinging material if you want to go there, although there's probably better ones on the market. So let's grab a little of the product and just go ahead and push it through the stencil. Again, it's super, super easy. You want to use enough quantity that you can pass it through. You can go back and take off excess, move it around to where it's needed, and that sort of thing. But it's pretty straightforward. If you've done this before with other stencils and with other products, you're going to have no problem with this. Again, it's a light consistency. You want to keep your stencil taped down. You want to maybe use the pixie spray or an adhesive spray on the back to keep it from pulling up so much. If the stencil pulls up and out of the way, you have the potential that you're going to smear your stenciling. And we've all been there, just even with regular brushes and ink. Now I went ahead and closed that up again because I don't want to start any drying time or anything like that. I'm just going to wipe off my palette knife in a wet paper towel, and I'm going to go and I'm going to grab some, what color should we use? Let me grab some of this yellow. And again, it's okay to go ahead and blend this right over top of what you've already done. You don't have to keep things separated. Of course they're going to mix. It's not, you know, they're not going to keep separate or anything like that, but it's not really an issue. Here we have quite a contrast between the two. And in areas where both is getting on, you're going to have some mixing going on. Now, if I go and use this further on down, you're going to see I have some of the blue on my palette knife because I picked it up. But again, super, super easy to mix on the work itself. You could also go over to the craft mat itself and mix colors on there. If I wanted to, I could go back and grab just a little bit more blue and sort of finish things off here at the end. I probably should have cleaned my knife first to keep the blue pure, but there wasn't enough there to really create a problem. And so there we go. Now if I set it aside to dry like this, it's going to take quite a bit of drying time because it is a pretty thick coat on here. So you can go ahead and scrape back off some of the product. Again, be careful about scraping too much because you will take it right back down to the paper. I've done it many, many times. You can also sort of freeform apply it to the paper using your palette knife. If you wanted to build up something, you can create that with the palette knife. If I wanted to create a fun texture in there, I can go ahead and do that. I have a lot of options. Again, you have to keep in mind it does have that fairly quick drying time, so you don't want to keep doing that kind of forever. Work on a craft mat so that you can get your surface behind clean and so that you can pull this up. I can't leave my stencil in place for very long because this product, even as we speak, is drying on the stencil. So I want to pick up that stencil, and you can see I've got the really cool chevron pattern. I'm going to bring that up a little bit closer. Look at the variations from pushing that yellow through as well, and how the color blends so nicely even on a stencil. Imagine if you really mixed it up right on your palette. Let me just clean up here just a little bit, and I'm going to grab a fresh piece of paper here to show you that one of the other things you can do is to go ahead and take this paper and spritz it with a little bit of water. And then I can lay my used stencil over top. I haven't cleaned it at all yet. And I want to lay another sheet of scratch paper over top. You can see this is really a scratch paper. Go ahead and press down for a few minutes. And when you lift up, you should have at least portions of the negative of your stencil on that paper. So it leaves for a lot of really cool practical uses for both the positive and negative of your design. Again, now that I'm quote unquote finished, I want to hurry up and clean up this stencil. The deeper colors do seem to leave a little color residue behind, and that's okay. It's not really going to harm the functioning of the stencil, but you don't want to leave gobs of it caked on there because it will have an impact on your design. Let's grab a towel here and dry it off a little bit, and we'll be good to go. By the way, this is one of the strips that you get in a set of stencil strips Melissa has from Tailored Expressions. It's a love set. And, you know, while ideal for Valentine's Day, it's got the words love, it's got some hearts, XOXO, some polka dots, and some stripes. So they're kind of fun for just adding small areas of stenciled whatever to your cards and that sort of thing. So be sure and check those out at the store too. So I'm going to set this aside to dry. I've got a pretty thick coat. I'm going to try and lift this up so you can see that there are definitely raised areas there. So I've got my texture with this. I've also got my texture up here. That's going to dry just fine. Again, it's a little bit of a blob, so it'll take a little bit more drying time to get it done, but it will happen. Now, one of the other cool things that you can do with this product is that once it's dry, you can kind of reactivate it by spraying, of all things, alcohol on it. And when you do that and place a piece of foil on top, you can get a really cool foiled result. So this is some of the purple paper glaze that I used, and then I grabbed this pink foil and just laid it over top, pressed down on it real good. I was not trying to get full coverage over this. If I had gotten full coverage with that pink, it would have covered entirely over the top of the purple, and I was just looking for something that would accent, not take it all away. But you can see how cool and shiny that is, and in person it's even better because there's little bits of the pink that you hardly see in these areas, and it just turned out really, really cool. To do that is just super, super easy. I've got a design, well, we saw this design before. This is one that I did yesterday using the pink, and the pink is very light, but it's a beautiful, beautiful color. Look at how gorgeous that is. All I'm gonna do is take a little bit of alcohol, and I put it in a spray bottle, but I've got it marked. You probably can't see, but it says alcohol 91%. I put the washi tape around this too, so that I remember this is alcohol and not water, because when you want water and you grab alcohol, sometimes you get a bad result. But in any event, I'm just gonna spray over in this end because I don't want to do the whole thing right now. So I've spritzed it a little bit. I'm going to leave it sit for just a second and let it work its magic. What we want it to do is to turn tacky. I don't want a lot of extra alcohol on there, so I'm going to grab a towel and sort of blot some that's sitting around the edges and some that's kind of pooling on there too. You should probably have a lighter hand with the spray than what I did, but nevertheless, it'll be fine. And the reason why I chose that sprayer in particular is because remember, you can get either the fine mist spray or you can get those splats, and I think that would be perfect with foil. Now this piece of foil still has a lot of unused areas, so I'm going to go ahead and use this over that. I'm going to check first. Oh, I got tacky. That's perfect. So I'm going to lay it over the top, and I'm just going to rub down on it. Super, super easy, right? Again, remember, you don't have to do the whole thing if you choose to do this. You can do pieces, parts, you can do little splats. I always try and use up my foil pieces too, so that if there's any color left on them, I try and grab that off. So let's gently pull back on the corner. And you can see that I've foiled somewhat around the edges, but my main area is yet to be foiled. Perhaps there wasn't enough there. Kind of the beauty of foil, that you can put it back down and keep going at it. And you can add other pieces and piece it together just to get that foil coverage. I've got a little bit more there. We'll go to this piece and see what I can do here. Part of it is waiting enough time for the alcohol, and I may not have done that in this video. I try and move it along because I know you guys don't have all day to sit and watch, and sometimes that's to my detriment. But I do find that the longer you let it sit, the more tacky it will get. The foil is ripping a little bit at the edges, so I'm just trying to pull it up carefully here. It is that sticky. So I think it's kind of cool. I've got some foiling around the edges, but not entirely on it. It would make a great mixed media piece to keep working this and trying to get, you know, pieces, parts foiled, adding foil. Again, remember, I only sprayed this corner, so this part is not going to be tacky for me to use the foil on. It's only where the alcohol touched that part is going to work. So patience and all that sort of thing. If I'd started with a new sheet of foil, you would have seen a more dramatic result too. But again, you can see how cool that is. Notice that where the foil attached, it covered over. So don't expect your color from the glaze to peek through the foil. The foil is going to take over that. but a mixture of foil and not foil is just a really cool result. I couldn't be happier about this little stuff here. That just turned out really cool. Again, I used a used foil sheet, and that's just fine. So if you have some hanging around, they're perfect for this kind of project. Or new sheets work just as well too. You're just going to get more coverage. Again, I used a new sheet when I did this, and it's the same foil. So you can see some areas here where I've got perfect coverage, and other areas where it's more like this, where it's more of an outline and that sort of thing. But a fun thing to be able to do with, of all things, paper glaze. Too fun. So again, mixing is no problem with this product. If I wanted to make this blue a little lighter, I would take the white and just mix some in, no problem. You saw me use this spatula to apply the product before. If you've got these Nuvo spatulas, they also work very well. I find for me, I put a little bit more pressure on. The rubber has a little give, so I tend to pick up too much of the paste or the glaze when I use these, as opposed to using the plastic or metal tools. But that's something you'll work out for yourself. You can also apply the product with a brush. And let's just look at that for a moment. Dry brush or wet brush, either one is perfectly fine for that, whether you're using a stencil or you're just trying to make a background. So I'm going to pick up a little bit. I've got a dry brush here, and you're going to see that I maintain the darkness of the color for the most part. It's going to go ahead and spread out for me as much as I want it to, or I can leave it fairly thick. So I have a lot of options with that. Now let's switch to wet brush. And all I'm doing is wetting that brush a little bit. You don't want the water dripping off, but now I've got a wet brush. You can see the water beating up on my hand. I'm going to grab a little bit more of the product, and you'll see that with a wet brush, you spread the product even smoother. So there's a lot of possibilities. This is a watercolor paper, so you can see it's just kind of soaking in and turning out really cool. But there's a lot of cool background potentials for this product. Some of our lighter colors are also really good on black cardstock. So here's my black. Let me rinse out my brush here one more time. So now I have a moist brush, not particularly wet. And I'm going to take this light pink again. You saw the light pink with the foil. But look at how rich and creamy that is on the black cardstock. Again, I could push it through a stencil. It would be just as gorgeous doing that. If I take a wet brush, dry off just a little bit here, and apply the product, again, I'm going to be able to get a thinner coverage. This has great potential for doing backgrounds where you just want a light kind of shimmer in the background and you don't want a lot of noise. So whether I do this on white paper or black paper, it doesn't really matter, or any other color for that matter. You have so many choices, again, about how to use the product. It's kind of up to you and your creativity to figure that part out. There are no rights and wrongs in crafting, obviously. Some things you just have to give a try. The foiling technique is something that was discovered at Picket Fence Studios by making a mistake. The person working on it grabbed their alcohol bottle instead of their water bottle and sprayed. So again, that's why I mark mine really bold, so that hopefully that'll jog my memory. But again, it's a fun product. Lots of ways to use it. I love the way this turned out with mixing the colors right on that stencil. I could have mixed it off to the side too and done that, but I wouldn't have gotten the same result. You can kind of ombre this if you have the right colors. Possibilities are pretty endless. So be sure and check out the Picket Fence paper glazes. There's 8 colors for you to try in the shop right now. I'm sure that you'll like them. Be sure and keep the lids on as much as possible. I mean, go ahead and use it while you're working a stencil, but put the lid on right after. Make sure there's not that crud around the outside. We've all done that. Let that build up around these edges, and then it's hard to get the lids on and off right. So make sure that doesn't build up. They say it's designed not to dry out like other products do, so we shouldn't have that problem. If you want to be super careful about that, remember that you can use a little piece of cling wrap over the top of the jar before you seal it up, and that will also help protect it too. Thanks for watching today. Have a great day.